entitled The Conservative War on the Poor. The public has commissioned the GOP to unify the country, but not necessarily to pursue the rest of its domestic agenda. In November of 1994, the conservative Republicans were swept into Congress by voters who wanted change, who wanted waste and fraud in government eliminated, who wanted smaller and more efficient government. They also wanted welfare reform. But did voters want to wage war on the poor? Were the voters aware of the long-standing philosophies of anti-government and anti-poor inculcated in the characters of the new conservative congressman and Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich? Did voters know that the Christianity of the new congressman divides the poor into several classes, one of which is the worthy poor? Were the voters aware that the conservative philosophies of welfare reform are not economically sound and would contract our economy dangerously? The conservative war on the poor is one of morality and has nothing to do with deficits or economics. In The New Politics of Poverty, Lawrence Mead wrote, "There is no clear relationship between social spending and economic growth or productivity." But what of purchasing power? The conservatives in Congress would have us believe that by granting purchasing power to the poor, we are breaking the bank or destroying our economy. This is absurd. The more people who can participate in an economy, the greater that economy becomes. America has the largest economy in the world, and in 1994 it was a $4.5 trillion economy. Today it is well over $7.5 trillion. We enjoy such a massive economy because of practices like Social Security, welfare, unemployment insurance, credit buying, and government as employer of last resort. Supply-side Republicans in Congress want to again tamper with our economy as they did in the 1980s, when they nearly brought it to its knees. In the guise of talk of economic well-being, these conservative Republicans want to foist their misguided moral economics on our country's poor. Reaganomics of the 1980s was oversold, ideologically and politically. It turned out to have little substance. The results of Reaganomics were quite limited. Michael J. Boskin in Reagan and the Economy said, "Permanently reducing the role of government in the economy was considered worth the problems associated with large deficits, even if they persisted for years." Do we grasp the import of this diabolical and deliberate political deed? The huge deficits weren't the fault of Congress. Under Reagan, our national debt tripled. President Jimmy Carter's 1981 budget had a deficit of $16 billion. His 1982 budget had a deficit of $27 billion. In contrast, Ronald Reagan's 1982 budget had a deficit of $128 billion. In 1983, 208 billion. 1984, 185 billion. 1985, 212 billion. 1986, 221 billion. And 1987, 158 billion dollars. Federal spending as a share of the gross national product went up under Reagan. The tax cuts in Reagan's first term were directly responsible for 50% of the deficit. The Reagan economic program submitted to Congress in 1981 was not the one advocated during the election campaign. Yet, supply-side sympathizers like Rush Limbaugh continue to tout the recovery of 1983-84 as a supply-side success. It wasn't. The Reagan economic program was a hodgepodge of compromises. It consisted of monetarism, supply-side economics, traditional conservative orthodoxy, and rational expectations. Under Reagan, there was no break in trend of growth of output and productivity and reduction of poverty. Reaganomics was the greatest fiscal disaster our country has suffered since the Great Depression until George W. Bush. And now, the conservative Republicans in Congress want to try it once again. This time, to bury us once and for all. Because of government redistribution of income from 1960 to 1979, the poverty rate went down from 22% to 11.7%. Now, those who worship a politicized economy want to reverse this trend. Because these people are bound by faith, they can't admit their errors. Their God is the market, yet their understanding of economics is naive. They don't admit the faults of capitalism. Instability, inefficiency, injustice, and insensitivity. We know that capitalism maximizes production, but supply-siders preach production without demand. During the 1980s, supply-siders took out loans and built buildings which weren't occupied due to lack of demand. These practices hurt the consumer. Do we want more of this? Let's not be fooled when religio supply-siders tell us it is good fiscal policy to cut or stop welfare payments to the poor. For the good of the economy, these payments should be increased. The conservative attack on the poor has nothing to do with economics. Because as Lawrence Mead wrote, the causes of poverty are mysterious. They have nothing to do with defeatism or character defects. Some 60% of the poor receive no cash help from the government. And 40% of the poor receive nothing at all. To hear conservatives tell it, the poor are driving our country to the poorhouse. In Who Will Tell the People, William Grider wrote, Reducing the tax burdens for the wealthy does not yield increased savings and investment. Faster economic growth that conservative logic promises. Supply-siders are liars. The minimum wage used to be 50% of the average manufacturing wage, but today it is 26 or 27%. Before he died, Lee Atwater, Mr. Conservative, said, "What is missing in society is a little heart, a little brotherhood." He admitted that the 1980s were about acquiring wealth, power, prestige. But you can acquire all you want and still be empty. We have a spiritual vacuum at the heart of American society, this tumor of the soul. Unquote. After Reagan's 1981 tax cuts, capital investment rose, but not in America. We subsidize the globalization of our own industrial structure. This is what conservative economics has wrought. It has wounded our nation gravely. The 1980s were good to managers, professionals, and investors in international commerce. From 1977 to 1990, money for corporate executives rose 220%. In 1960, the average after-tax income of chief executives was 12 times greater than factory workers. But by 1990, it was 70 times greater. This dangerous redistribution of wealth contracts our economy. When too much money is concentrated at the top, the only way to spread more money around is to expand the money supply, which leads to inflation. The economy can be pictured as a pyramid, with the rich at the top and the poor at the bottom. It is better for an economy when most of the money circulates through the bottom layers. Imagine the economy as a game of Monopoly. Suppose 4 people were playing and one person had 70% of the money. How could the others function or even compete? They couldn't. They would be at a distinct disadvantage. This might be good in a game, but not in real life. Buyers and sellers make up a market. Would a diamond seller set up shop in Haiti and in a supply-side manner try to convince people with no money to buy his product? No. That would be stupid and wouldn't make economic sense. But this is what conservatives preach. If you build it, they will come. Their philosophies don't take into account purchasing power. This is the chink in their economic armor. Conservatives know that to reform welfare, the debate must rid itself of care and compassion. Historically, attitudes toward welfare in southern states has been stringent. Mississippi will do as an example. This is plantation economics, a form of slavery. In this system, wealth is concentrated at the top. This is bad economics. Our top tax rate is lower than the bottom rate in other industrialized countries. Under Ronald Reagan, our top tax rate was lowered from 70% to 50%, and today it is even lower. Most of us are not overtaxed in this country. We are underpaid. Any tax system that allows for concentration of wealth in the hands of the rich is a bad economic system. I refer you to Proverbs 22, verse 16. The only way to lower tax rates and not lose revenue is to broaden the tax base. This is what occurred under Ronald Reagan. The rich paid less, but revenues increased because now we were taxing Social Security and unemployment insurance. The impact of increases of government spending is likely to be larger than those of tax cuts. Why then do conservatives always whine that we need tax cuts? Are they thinking of themselves or of the economy? The reduction of poverty throughout the 1970s was due to increased cash assistance programs of the federal government and a robust economy. But then why do conservatives repeat the lie that welfare doesn't work? They must have a hidden agenda. And how was the middle class helped under Reagan, when the small amounts of income returned to them meant little to them and our economy? It was all symbolism. The tax cuts under Ronald Reagan added little to our savings and investment rate. It was all a sham. The rich threw a bone to the middle class while they walked away with the boneyard. This has happened every time Congress tinkered with the tax code. Today, we don't have a fair tax code. But this doesn't mean we can fix the tax code with gimmicks like the value-added tax, the consumption tax, or the flat tax. When President Abraham Lincoln instituted the tax to pay for the Civil War, he taxed the rich. When the income tax became law in 1913, it taxed the rich. The progressive income tax used to tax the rich, unless they found loopholes. Our robust economic growth of the 1960s and 70s was accomplished with a progressive income tax. A fair tax is one that taxes those with money. This is common sense. Today, the rich want us to leave them alone and tax those with little money. This sounds like ancient Rome, or even Israel under King Saul. Balanced budgets can't stop recessions, inflation, or guarantee rapid growth. But if we know this, then why do conservatives get away with attacking the poor on economic grounds? Is it a political pandering to the libertarian-minded in our voting population? How about the populace? Is their moral attack made to appeal to them? Conservatives blame the poor for their plight. And if they have to help anyone, it should only be the worthy poor. They claim Paul as their authority here. If any would not work, neither should he eat. 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 10. But Paul was not talking about the poor in general here, only the disorderly and busybodies. No one in his right mind would tell a man in New York he must get a job in New Jersey if he expects help. The problem is conservatives view work as punishment. This is part of their moral code. They know that work as an incentive to get ahead won't sell. In the deep recesses of their minds, they know prosperity is not for everyone, and it has nothing to do with effort. They know this, but they won't admit it. Hundreds of millions of Americans have lived, worked, died, and never got to enjoy the good life. It's not for want of talent or hard work that most of us will just get by in life. It's because success depends on opportunity, environment, readiness, and who one knows. No one can pull himself up by his bootstraps alone. Anyone who says the opposite is a liar. The conservatives in Congress believe religious beliefs underlie most activities. Regarding the poor, they believe charity can be withheld at times. In early America, charity went along with an enforced religiosity upon the poor. Early Americans believed the family, church, and neighborhood should help the poor. Personal involvement was stressed. Giving to beggars was wrong. In the 1820s, it was believed that the solution to poverty was piety, frugality, industry, and intemperance. They believed that government guarantees increased the supply of poverty by ruining attitudes. All relief was supposed to be temporary. As the supply is, so will be the demand. It was believed that the poor must be disciplined into providence. It wasn't surprising that this war on poverty was never won. During the Great Depression, hundreds of private welfare agencies went under because they weren't up to the job. Until the government stepped in, this war on poverty was also lost. Now, incompetent voices are crying out that liberals have lost the present-day war on poverty. This is a lie. These same incompetent voices want to again privatize all social services. They claim government welfare programs treat people like animals. But what are they doing when they refuse to give a quarter to a homeless person? These conservative social measures have failed several times before. How many more chances do they want? Because of their unshakable mystical faith, they don't realize that their philosophies don't work and can't work in the real world. This is why we are warned that the conservative character can't guide living reality. We must stop giving credence to their social propaganda, issuing forth from their pet think tanks like the Cato Institute and the Heritage Foundation. Charles Murray said it would take $90 billion to erase poverty. Well, let's get cracking. Everyone knows that the difference between rich and poor is money. We have lazy, stupid, bad-mannered, character-defective rich people as well as poor. Being poor is not a matter of character or genes. Adopting the Christian frame of reference for a moment, Jesus said the poor would always be with us. This sounds like predestination and not the fault of the poor. The conservative attack on the poor is not some great economic policy that is necessary for our fiscal soundness. The attack is merely because conservatives don't like the poor. They fear the independence displayed by some of the poor. They are jealous of the poor, thinking the poor get something for nothing. But would they trade places with the poor? No, they wouldn't. But why not, if the poor have it so good? The attack on the poor is real and dangerous. If conservatives get their way, and jobs are not available, and welfare is not an option, then society will devolve to an earlier stage of evolution, when we survived by taking from others. Maybe this is exactly what conservatives want. as an excuse to institute a more stringent police state. The end.
Hi, this is William Morrow. Are you one of those people who join a health club, and after they have your big, overpriced annual membership, you notice that you're on your own with little or no results even after all the promises? Then the website Personal Trainer is for you.
Thank you very much, William H. Morrow III.
So you lost another argument with a conservative, right-wing Republican. He talked over you. He screamed and yelled. He brought out the Bible. He thumped it. He quoted scripture to you. You were lost because you came at him with facts. Nothing but facts. And you expected that would make you look good. That would make you win the argument, but it didn't. You know why you lost the argument? You know why you're going to lose your next argument? Because you don't read Censored. Censored, the 30-year-old newsletter that shows you how to defeat a conservative. Read Censored, and you'll have all the ammunition you need. Every time you get into an argument with a right-wing conservative, so-called Christian. Censored. That's all you need. Read it and defeat a conservative.
Greetings, listeners. Let me speak to you for a moment about the foundation of our entire organization, Newsletter Censored. It was founded by our mentor, the Reverend Dr. William J. Eisenman, in 1977. It discusses the 5 taboos of American life: politics, religion, health, human sexuality, and child rearing. You won't find anything like this in the mainstream media and the press. It reveals the kind of truth that most people are afraid to hear. Can you handle it? We are living in the end times, so in order to defeat a conservative and save America, you need Newsletter Censored. Go to www.newslettercensored.com, click on the printable order form page, and with your gift to support this work, get your free annual subscription. This is James P. Madonna of Megalife 21, the hardest hitting internet talk radio station on the planet.